W Hobbies player. That means he's actually secretly pretty good. All those players now are W Hobbies. That's one of the best stores of all time for Magic up there in the Michigan area. I'm getting ready to play against John Hobbs. This is a Sunbaked Canyon to start. There is a one-drop in Goblin Guide. Let's do this thing here, partner. Revealing, that problematic creature is a Tarmogoyf, a good card against burn.
One of the best. And really important for the Death Shadow player here. You want to get a big body onto the battlefield as fast as possible, start clocking them, shrinking the length of the game. Sometimes that can be Gurmag Angler, but that's more of a feature of the Grixis builds. For Jund, it's Tarmogoyf.
Mishra's Bauble to start there for Hobbs. He'll take a look at his top card. And now he'll play a Verdant Catacombs. Hobbs is a player who actually won an Open earlier this year, teaming up with Dominic Harvey and Jeremy Battarioni. Our team open in Pittsburgh earlier this year. So he's no stranger to success. He's number 11 on our SCG Tour Player of the Year leaderboard as well. So he's having a very, very, very nice year as Johnathan Hobbs, a young player from Marion, Indiana.
One of the more complicated matchups to play in all of Modern. As Death Shadow player wants to get Slave Total low, but not too low to get finished up by a flurry of spells. Burn player wants to get in some damage early, but not so much that Death Shadow or Teamer Battle Rage enter the equation as ways to kill.
There's a Monastery Swift Spear here for Carey. He's going to fall down to 18. He'll attack here for 3 points of damage. Verdant Catacombs is the reveal, and that will be added to Hobbs' hand. It doesn't look like Carey has another land, though, and he does not. So he will simply pass the turn back with, looks like at least a couple 2-drops in hand in Boros Charm and Eidolon of the Great Revel. That is a Tarmogoyf, which can always be a problem for burn decks to beat. Now, there is only an artifact and a land in the graveyard, but having an artifact in the graveyard is pretty key because that means that Lightning Bolt's not going to kill this thing. It'd be 3 damage to a 3/4 once state-based effects are checked. Now, a second land off the top is pretty timely there for Bryan Carey. He was missing a second land to be able to play an Eidolon or Searing Blaze or any number of 2-mana spells, but that problem is now solved. Looks like he's got a couple copies of Riftbolt and Skewer the Critics in hand, so it looks like actually a pretty good hand. Now it comes down, partner, to the sequencing.
Right, so you can play Eidolon in the spot. Eidolon's pretty strong against Jund in this spot because they can't play over the top with Delve spells typically, so you're going to get at least one trigger for your trouble. The problem with playing the Eidolon here is that if it dies, now you've put not only a creature but an enchantment in the graveyard as well, and the clock gets quite a bit different. But if you assume that Hobbs is basically going to have to spend his turn killing the Eidolon, if he hangs back on defense, no harm, no foul. And if he attacks, then you have an opportunity to race back.
Now, Hobbs does have a copy of Fatal Push in hand, so he does have an answer for the Eidolon of the Great Revel right now. If he so chooses, ideally John would be able to play 2 spells in 1 turn. He does also have another copy of Tarmogoyf in hand, so some real decisions to be had here for Johnathan Hobbs.
I think the tiebreaker there for Carey, it's close whether or not you want to be casting some spells or playing an Eidolon that turn is, I think for the tiebreaker is, that's the last turn the Eidolon's going to be any good at all. Past that, whatever Hobbs would be doing on this turn, adding another threat to the battlefield or attacking your hand, the Eidolon would be much weaker. So this is kind of your last spot to do anything with it. Your spells remain good for several turns.
I think I would agree with that. Tricky thing here for Hobbs is that his next land drop he actually doesn't have, but in a weird way he does because he has a copy of Traverse the Uvenwald in hand, but that's a land drop that he has to take 2 to facilitate.
That doesn't count here. I mean, if you want to, you can push the Eidolon, but it looks like that's going to be essentially Hobbs' turn here. Well, this is the other way to do it.
He's going to play a Death Shadow. That's going to the Eidolon trigger is going to bring him down to 11, and he says, I'm going to give some beatdowns here. So before damage, looks like he's going to Fatal Push the Eidolon. The Death Shadow is going to be larger. The Tarmogoyf is going to grow quite a bit because an instant, a creature, and an enchantment are placed into the graveyard. So it's kind of a permanent giant growth that takes place there. Carey takes a hit. Hobbs takes some damage. We head back over to Bryan Carey. who's picked up another copy of Boros Charm. Again, it's going to come down to some sequencing here, because for Carey, he's got 2 Boros Charms in hand, 2 Rift Bolts, and a Skewer the Critics. And how are you supposed to sequence this one, partner?
Well, if he's got 2 Rift Bolts, that makes it easy. I mean, you just suspend both. This gives you the opportunity to use all of your mana this turn and set up for lethal next turn in a way that doesn't add any damage to the Death Shadow clock this turn. That's as good as it gets.
Okay.
You pass the turn here, you chump block, you hope that there's no Teamer Battle Rage, Flurry combo kill that gets you here, and then you untap, you finish off the game with your Rift Bolts and your Boros Charms.
So these early creatures that did a little bit of damage, well, now these hang back to block.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a pretty normal rhythm in this matchup is the creatures get in early, and later on in the game they become chomp blockers as you try to finish off the game with some spells. They have a lot of one-mana interaction, a lot of one-mana threats. So your creatures, and their creatures are so big that you can't really interact with them that well. So it's not like you're going to go all the way with a creature. It doesn't really work that way. But one hit and one chump block can be more than a mana's worth.
This will be a Thoughtseize. It's going to go after Skewer the Critics. Hobbs is going to sacrifice a fetch land. I think he's going to go get himself some red mana now. Could we be in Teamer Battle Rage territory? He's going to play that Blood Crypt untapped. So he's going to fall down a little bit lower. Here come the Knuckleheads. 13 minus 4. That means the Death Shadow is 9/9.
You just got to chump. All you can do is chump here, and if it's Teamer Battle Rage, I don't think really matters a whole lot how Carey blocks.
Well, let's see what this is. It's going to be a Gore Clan Rampager.
Yep.
So that's 13. 13 minus 2. Is that 11? Well, actually, so 13 minus 4 is 9. 9 plus 4 is 13 minus 2 trample damage is exactly 11 by my math.
Mm-hmm.
See if he has the same math as I do. And Johnathan Hobbs is going to win game number 1 thanks to the Gore Clan Rampager.
So here's the other way that, I mean, these turns are really complicated. By suspending the 2 Rift Bolts, you give Hobbs kind of a clean shot to go down to 4. You could, alternatively, pass with all of your mana up, have Boros Charm ready,
okay,
and if Hobbs goes too far down, you can kill him on the spot. The problem is that your hand's a little awkward the next turn. You're down to 2 Rift Bolts, which you can't do anything with, a Skewer, and a Boros Charm. At that point, you're drawing to a 3rd land to Boros Charm plus Skewer out. You're also drawing to any 1-mana spell to pair with the Skewer for lethal as well. But all of this is only a hedge against Hobbs going down to exactly 4.
Sure.
Which is just, but that's how it worked out there. He was able to Thoughtseize, find a fetch land that was untapped, and he needed every little bit of it. Also, the way that Carey did it necessitated tapping a Sunbait Canyon, which now got him to 12, and he got exactly killed there on the spot.
Yeah.
All this is to say, these games are really complicated to play. Every decision matters. If Carey passes there without doing anything, really good chance that Hobbs, doesn't cooperate. But with 2 Boros Charms and Hobbs at 9, if he basically takes any game action at all and you survive the turn, now you have lethal. It's tricky. Tricky stuff.
They are very, very tricky
stuff.
games. Whether it's Jund Death Shadow, 4-color, or Grixis Death Shadow, it's very, very tricky to play with and against in the burn matchup. We take a look at the sideboards here. Here for Bryan Carey, we got 4 Skullcracks, 4 Smash to Smithereens, those core Firewalkers that maybe you just picked up. Maybe he's using those from the Star City Games booth, along with 2 Path to Exile and 2 Grim Lavamancer. What do we like here?
So my preference for this matchup is the 2 copies of Path to Exile and the 4 copies of Skullcrack. They have a lot of big creatures. Being able to interact with Death Shadow or Tarmogoyf Life is really valuable. And in this matchup, I really dislike the creatures post board.
Okay.
The Skullcracks are good against Collective Brutality, and I just want to become more of a Lava Spite deck, so I like bringing those in as well.
For Johnathan Hobbs, the first card that is listed there gets top billing, 4 copies of Collective Brutality. You know those are coming in. 3 Alpine Moons, 2 Veil Summer, 2 Fulminator Mage, and a couple 1-ups here in Collector Oof, Plague Engineer, Liliana the Veil, and Kolaghan's Command.
The 4 Collective Brutalities are awesome here, of course. There are a couple fringe options here that one can consider. Kolaghan's Command, Liliana the Veil, and interesting enough, Fulminator Mage, all can be good in this matchup. And, Hobbs may want to bring in some or all or none, depending on how much space he has.
Well, these players are already almost ready for game number 2. They've sideboarded, already shuffling up and taking a look at opening hands. So we're going to take a quick look at our Players' Championship and then watch game number 2 unfold.
It's been a while, but I feel like I've seen this movie before. Pass the turn back. Is it a top deck?
Oh
it's
my
a
God.
Pendlehaven. Pump and attack? Is this real?
Oh my God. Oh no.
December 13th through the 15th, right here, twitch.tv/SCG Tour. 16 players, one winner, $50,000 on the line. That's the Star City Games Players Championship later this year. As Bryan, Carey is going to start things off with a Rift Bolt on suspend. You said you like sideboarding the creatures out, so does this strike you as a normal play pattern here with Rift Bolt on suspend?
Yep, it's not a bad turn one. You'd prefer to avoid it if at all possible, because in this matchup against the Jund build, you would prefer to not put a sorcery in the graveyard if you can avoid it for Tarmogoyf considerations, but they play with so much discard that it's really hard to avoid. My preference in this matchup is I usually go -4 Eidolon, -2 Searing for 6 cards.
Okay. You still leave your 1-drop creatures, and you just don't like Eidolon very much.
Yeah, the math gets mucky. As you saw in that game, it gives the Death Shadow player the opportunity for some creative lines. And for me, the nail in the coffin is it's an enchantment. And so much of the game comes down to the particulars of Tarmogoyf math. And just giving them a free card type in the graveyard is a real deal breaker.
Sure.
Also, if you want to have Skullkraken post-board, it's really hard to play. If you Eidolon and they shoot you with Brutality, it's like over.
Yeah.
Over on the spot. You can maybe afford to do it with the 1-mana creatures. You can either, you can hold up your Skullcrack. Any Prowess trigger will save a Swift Spear in that scenario. But the Eidolon is just leading your face into their knockout punch.
Yep. It's kind of what they want you to do.
Right.
Eidolon the Great Revel was discarded by the Inquisition of Kozak as we head back over to Johnathan Hobbs. Sitting at a very healthy 16 now. Of course, he'd like to be a little bit lower than that so the Death Shadow can do Death Shadow things. So he'll just play a Snow-Covered Swamp and pass the turn back. Carey's going to sacrifice the Scalding Tarn. He'll fall down to at least 19. I imagine Sacred Foundry's on the way here in just a moment. And he's actually going to fire off a Skullcrack. So how do you feel about firing off some burn spells at the opponent at early stages of the game like this with no constant sources of damage on the battlefield?
Really depends on the how sensitive you are to your mana, how tight it is. In Hobbs' spot there, if he has a Collective Brutality, he's probably casting it. I mean, he's not going to wait for you to play a creature. Brutality to duress you and maybe gain some life depending would be good enough. At the point where he isn't showing Collective Brutality, you can be a little bit more liberal just playing your stuff on time. This is especially the case if you have Sunbait Canyon, because you're going to have 2 mana tied up in that somewhere down the line. And with Sunbait Canyon, you kind of want to empty out and then gas back up with it. You don't want to hand Jan full of spells when that happens.
Path to Exile was the draw step. Carey's got 3 spells in hand right now, and the Sunbait Canyon, as Patrick mentioned, was the land for the turn. Looks like Hobbs took 1 from the Peat land, and now he'll take 2 from the Blood Crypt. So he's already down to 10 because he wants to get a Death Shadow deployed.
Yeah, and Path is such an awesome draw in this spot because Hobbs doesn't know about it, and he's going to do some work here to set up these Death Shadows to be out of removal range, and he might do some work for you getting his life total low. Your Path still answers the Death Shadow, and you have a lot of burn spells to work with.
And this is one of those spots where you don't have to worry about Stubborn Denial, so you can actually blow up a Gorkland Rampager or a Temur Battle Rage.
Yeah.
So I think this is a spot where Path actually is the last card you want to play. You actually want to empty out some burn spells here.
At the end of the day, I don't know if the matchup is not into that unless you have a Searing effect. You have a Searing. Well, actually, that doesn't work either because they end up on 8.
Yeah, that's really bad news.
Yeah.
That happening. That's a waste of a card right there entirely. So I think compounding the mistake a little bit here, because now you're opening yourself up to getting hit by these Gorkland Rampager, Temur Battle Rage style effects now.
Well, the other big thing, that is true. The other big thing is the Path to Exile is really an ace in the hole. Hobbs doesn't know about it. And he's going to assume that these Death Shadows are basically untouchable other than maybe you have 1 or 2 paths in your sideboard. Mm-hmm. He is going to walk into some lines of play, not really willing to concede a lot to play around it. I would much rather just sacrifice a Sunbait Canyon there. Spend your 2 mana there, have more options, and kind of force Hobbs to either spend a lot of equity playing around a path or walking into it. Either one is good for you.
Yeah, I just don't like a path on an empty board there. Johnathan hasn't committed more resources and hasn't damaged himself enough that you're causing yourself more trouble there than I think is necessary. Here's an Inquisition of Kozilek. Skullcrack's going to be played in response, so Bryan has an empty hand. The Inquisition's going to whiff. Hobbs will play a Bloodstained Mire. You can see his hand there. He also has an Assassin's Trophy. 13 minus 6 is 7, so Death Shadow is a 7/7 right now. It can, of course, be much larger than that. And now Hobbs trying to figure out exactly what he wants to do here. Now, if you're Bryan and Johnathan Hobbs attack you with no cards in your hand, are you blocking? Or are you taking the hit?
I'm two mana.
I asked the tough questions.
Yeah, I'm blocking. There's just no, like, his hand's got a creature in it or it's got spells in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if he's got spells in it, if you don't chump block this turn, you might not get a chance to next turn. And if it's creature, she just gets to have a blocker back.
Now that's interesting. No attack there from Hobbs. If I'm Bryan, I'm pretty happy about that. He'll sacrifice the Sunbay Canyon, draw a card. He drew Inspiring Vantage and Monastery Swift Spear. Not exactly what the doctor ordered. I think he's looking for direct damage. Now in this spot, if I'm Bryan, I think I just play the Inspiring Vantage and say go.
No, I would play the creature as well.
Yeah?
You get the upshot is either you get to sneak attack if the combat goes a certain way, or he might cast a discard spell he otherwise might not. The problem is that if the Swift Spear gets taken out of your hand via discard spell, now you just might die.
Sure.
The extra chump blocker, if Hobbs can't find a Temur Battle Rage or a Gore Clan Rampager, then that Swift Spear is worth a full block, a full turn, a full draw step. It's just too valuable to give that up in the hopes of getting fancy and tricking him somehow.
Mishra's Bauble. We'll take a look at the top card there for Bryan. So Hobbs getting some info. He'll also be drawing a card here on Bryan's turn, so long as he remembers the trigger. And beat down. So last time he wasn't willing to attack, this time he is.
And this is, to go back to a couple turns ago, imagine how much more complicated all of this is, how much more margin there is for Hobbs to screw up if Path is floating around as a mystery in Carey's hand.
Mm-hmm. Stomping Ground's going to enter the battlefield tapped. Hobbs is going to fall down to 5. Now, I think that the reason Johnathan was able to make this attack is because he knows the top cards of his opponent's deck.
Right.
Which seems to me to believe that Bryan's probably drawing a land. Hobbs draws his cards, Kolaghan's Command, which actually is quite good. And he's going to K-command Goblin Guide and make him discard. And the card he's discarding is a Swift Spear. So now he passes the turn back. And now I think we're going to see Traverse for Rampager. Yep. Hobbs has set up a very, very nice little game here. Kid's pretty good, man.
Yep.
Kid's pretty good.
Not an easy matchup to play well. No. Navigated it extremely well there. 9-0. Undefeated at the end of day number 1.
Right at the top of the standings. He's either going to be first or second, depending on how Dominic Harvey's match goes. But Jonathan